Welcome to day 17 of the Jeffrey Epstein release the files controversy surrounding Donald Trump. And I will tell you that on day 17, I am ever more convinced we're going to get to day 30 than I have been. Because day 16 was a really bad day for Donald Trump. Quick summary. The Wall Street Journal, then the New York Times, then pretty much every other outlet reported that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, had briefed Donald Trump in the spring on the fact that his name appeared multiple times in the Epstein investigation files. I will also note that in February, Bondi said that she was looking through the Epstein client list in an interview with Fox News, and in July, she released a 2-page memo from the Department of Justice saying there was no client list. And again, just as a reminder, spring is between February and July. Okay, so I actually want to talk about something that Politico reported this morning about Donald Trump's sort of state of mind and what he thinks is going to happen here. And I think it's really interesting. First of all, they quote a Republican close to the White House who said recently that Trump thinks this, quote, "They're going to accuse me of some funny business about the Epstein fault. They're going to accuse me of some funny business." And then he later added, "They're going to F me anyways." So this, I think, is actually useful and insightful because I do think that one of the reasons that this has been handled so poorly is Donald Trump's unwillingness to acknowledge, as I've said, that he and Jeffrey Epstein were friends. And I'm always hesitant in a situation like this where the crime that Jeffrey Epstein committed is the sexual exploitation and sexual trafficking of girls, and very young girls, kids in some cases. I'm always hesitant to say the cover-up is worse than the crime, because the crime is really bad. But if we're talking about Donald Trump specifically, I actually think that holds here, in that we don't know that he did anything illegal here, although I would say his behavior suggests he's very nervous about that, but we don't know he did anything illegal. And yet the way that he has approached this investigation, and honestly, like the fact when Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, the way he's approached this from the beginning makes him look like there's something really big to cover up. Now, I'm not sure that's the case. I know the left is convinced that's the case, and that's why he hasn't released this stuff, because he and Jeffrey Epstein were engaged in this kind of behavior. I'm not convinced that's the case, because I actually do buy the logic that if Donald Trump was engaged in the sexual trafficking and sexual exploitation of young girls, it probably would have come out during the Biden administration when the Joe Biden's people were in all these offices, including at the DOJ and the FBI. But I do think that quote from Politico is, "They're going to accuse me of some funny business. They're going to F me anyways." He doesn't say F, but I'm not going to swear. Is illuminating, because I do think it is proof of how Donald Trump thinks. And I think it has informed everything in terms of how he has approached this whole story. He is convinced that he's going to get blamed and implicated in all of this if there is any evidence that he and Jeffrey Epstein were friends. But they obviously were friends, as I've said. And so I think acknowledging that on the front end would have done him a whole hell of a lot of good. He's obviously too far down the road to do that. But he is just he has a victim mentality. We know that. He's very conspiracy minded. He's very suspicious. And I think all of those things have made it so that his administration, the response, I'm not going to say the cover up, the response to the Jeffrey Epstein story by this administration has been woeful. Really, really bad. Like the exact opposite of how you would handle something like this, unless you knew that if these files come out, Donald Trump is going to be, exposed as a sexual predator, which again, I don't think is what's in these files, which is why I think the approach to the reaction to the files is so misguided by Trump. I just think he is a believer that your name being in a thing with Jeffrey Epstein is going to make you guilty in the eyes of the public, that people are out there to get him. They're looking for anything. And that paranoia, honestly, I think has informed his approach, and I think his approach has been just terrible. And I think it's led to Pam Bondi saying things she probably shouldn't have said. It's led to the White House in general, his administration figures denying things that they shouldn't deny. It's led to him saying, no, Pam Bondi didn't tell me that my name was in the Epstein files, when we now know Pam Bondi did tell him that his name was in the Epstein files. So again, it's not the cover-up is worse than the crime, but I would say the response is worse than at least what we know of Donald Trump and the Epstein files. And I think that more than what we know, because we don't really know much, has continued to fuel this story, and I think will continue to fuel the story, because I think people look at the response and they say, well, if this is his response, what must be in those files? And again, I'm not sure anything is in those files that's terrible about Donald Trump. I just think it's his natural paranoia, his natural victimhood that's driving all of this and continues to drive it. All right, everybody, one thing you can do for me, just this one thing, just become a subscriber. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get a bunch of content for free. All right, everyone, take care.